I moved into my dream condo, only to find myself in a quiet war with the HOA queen. She thought she ruled the community, but she made one critical mistake when she tried to break into my home. Buying my first condo felt like a massive step into adulthood. It was my own space, my own walls, my own little slice of tranquility after years of noisy apartments and questionable roommates. The complex was nice, well-maintained, and quiet. Or so I thought. My illusion of peace lasted approximately 48 hours, which is how long it took for me to meet Carol, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association. She arrived at my door with what she called a welcome basket, which was really a thinly veiled welcome/interrogation kit. Inside, nestled next to a single, slightly stale muffin, was a 3-inch thick binder labeled Community Bylaws and Regulations. Carol herself was a woman with a haircut you could set your watch to, and the eagle-eyed gaze of a predator who'd just spotted a wounded gazelle. "Just wanted to personally welcome you to The Willows," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We take great pride in our community standards. I'm sure you'll find everything you need to know in the binder." The first notice appeared on my door less than a week later. It was a crisp, passive-aggressive letter about my welcome mat. Apparently, its whimsical "wipe your paws" message and cartoon dog design violated Bylaw 7C, subsection D, regarding non-standardized entryway decor. The approved color palette was beige, taupe, or greige. I rolled my eyes but tossed the mat. It wasn't a hill I was willing to die on. The next violation was for my wind chimes. They were a gift from my grandmother, a gentle melodic set of bamboo tubes that made a soothing sound in the breeze. Carol didn't see it that way. I received another notice, this time citing a rule against unapproved auditory decorations. When I called her to argue that they were barely audible, she informed me, in a tone one might use with a particularly dense toddler, that auditory harmony is a community-wide decision, not a personal one. Down came the wind chimes. The tension really started to ramp up over a package delivery. I work long, often unpredictable hours, so I get a lot of things delivered. One afternoon, I got a notification that a package had arrived. When I got home that night, it was gone. I started to panic, thinking it was stolen, until I saw yet another note taped to my door. "Package secured in HOA office due to its prolonged presence on your porch, a violation of Aesthetic Guideline 11A. Please retrieve during office hours, 9 a.m. to 11 a.m., Monday and Wednesday only." That was it. I marched over to her unit, which was conveniently located right across from mine, and knocked. She opened the door, a smug little smirk on her face. "Can I help you?" "You took my package, Carol?" "I secured your property," she corrected. "We can't have boxes cluttering up the walkways. It looks tacky and invites porch pirates, which, as you know, lowers our property values." "My property values are going to plummet when I file a police report for mail theft," I shot back, my voice dangerously low. Her smirk vanished. "There's no need to be dramatic. I was doing you a favor. You should be more mindful. I have a master key for every unit, you know, for emergencies. I could have just put it inside for you, but I was trying to respect your privacy." The sheer audacity of that statement left me speechless. A master key? The thought sent a chill down my spine. The legalities of that seemed dubious at best. I snatched my package from her the next morning and decided my new strategy was to be a ghost. I'd be the perfect, invisible resident. No decor, no noise, no packages left out for more than 5 minutes. For a few weeks it worked. There was blessed silence. No notes, no passive-aggressive emails, no sightings of Carol peering through her blinds at me. I was just getting home from a grueling 14-hour shift, exhausted and ready to collapse. As I walked down the hallway toward my door, I heard something. A scratching sound. A metallic scrape. Then a distinct click, followed by a muffled curse. My senses, already on high alert from my job, went into overdrive. My heart hammered in my chest. That wasn't the sound of someone knocking. It was the sound of someone fumbling with my lock. I flattened myself against the wall, peering around the corner. And there she was. Carol. She had a key ring in her hand with a single shiny brass key, and she was trying to jam it into my deadbolt. I watched, frozen in a mix of fury and disbelief, as she twisted it with all her might. There was a sickening snap. The head of the key came off in her hand, leaving the other half buried deep inside my lock. She froze, her eyes wide with panic. She looked left, then right, her face a mask of guilt. That's when I decided to make my entrance. I took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the corner. "Having some trouble there, Carol?" She shrieked and spun around, dropping the broken key head with a clatter. Her face went from pale to ghostly white as she saw me standing there. But she wasn't looking at my face. Her eyes were wide, locked onto the crisp, dark blue fabric of my uniform and the gleaming silver badge pinned right over my heart. The silence in the hallway was thick enough to chew. Her frantic, shallow breaths were the only sound as the full reality of her situation crashed down on her. The woman who fined me for my welcome mat was now staring at a badge that represented the very authority she loved to pretend she had. "Officer," she stammered, her voice a squeak. I didn't know. You didn't know this was my condo, or you didn't know that what you're doing is called attempted unlawful entry." I kept my voice low and even, the same tone I use on a traffic stop right before I ask the driver to step out of the vehicle. It has a way of cutting through panic and instilling a very specific kind of fear. "No, it wasn't like that. I was performing a wellness check," she blurted out, her eyes darting around as if looking for a script. "Yes, a wellness check. Your curtains were drawn all day, and I was concerned. It's my duty as HOA president." I let out a short, humorless laugh. "My curtains were drawn because I worked the night shift, Carol. I was sleeping. And a wellness check starts with a knock, maybe a phone call. It ends with calling my department if you have a legitimate concern for my welfare. It does not, under any circumstances, involve using a key you shouldn't have to break into my home." I took a deliberate step forward, and she flinched back against my door. "Speaking of which, let's talk about that key." I pointed at the broken piece on the floor. "That was your master key for emergencies, I presume." Yes, the board approved it. For fires and floods. And apparently for nosy neighbors with a power trip," I said, my voice dropping colder still. "You just committed a crime, Carol. Willfully damaging my property for one, and attempting to enter my private residence without a warrant or probable cause. That master key of yours, in this context, it's legally indistinguishable from a burglar's tool." Her face, if possible, got even paler. She looked like she might faint. "Burglar? No. I am the HOA president. I uphold the rules." "You don't get to uphold the rules by breaking the law." I crouched down and carefully picked up the broken keyhead with a tissue from my pocket, treating it like evidence, because it was. "Now here's what's going to happen. You're going to go back to your unit and bring me every single master key you have for this building. All of them. And you're going to bring me the HOA binder. But the keys are for everyone's safety. They are a massive liability and a gross invasion of privacy, and as of this moment, they are evidence in a potential criminal investigation. Get them. Now." My tone left no room for argument. She scurried away like a frightened mouse. A moment later, my next-door neighbor, Mr. Henderson, a sweet old man who Carol had once fined for having a garden gnome she deemed tacky, poked his head out. "Everything all right, son?" he asked, his eyes flicking from me to the broken lock. "Heard a bit of a commotion." "Just sorting out an issue with building security, Mr. Henderson," I said, giving him a reassuring nod. "Don't worry, it's being handled." Carol returned a few minutes later, her arms full. She thrust a heavy keyring at me with at least 24 keys on it, along with the thick, welcome binder. She looked utterly defeated. I took the keys and tossed them on my beige, approved, welcome mat. "Now," I said, flipping open the binder, "show me the bylaw. The one that gives you, personally, the right to maintain a master key and enter a resident's home for a non-emergency." She wrung her hands, her eyes downcast. It's in Section 14. Board's right of entry." I found it easily. I read the jargon-filled paragraph aloud, my voice echoing in the quiet hall. "In the event of a verifiable emergency posing an imminent threat to property or life, a designated board member may access the unit to mitigate damage." "Carol, do I look like an imminent threat to you?" She just shook her head, staring at the floor. I didn't think so, I said, closing the binder with a loud smack that made her jump. You've terrorized this community with these rules for long enough. This whole master key scheme is over. I will be speaking with a lawyer, and I will be presenting this to the other residents. You have abused your power, broken the law, and compromised the safety of every single person living here. Ah, I thought that was it. I expected tears, maybe some pleading, but as she finally looked up, her fear was being replaced by something else. A hard, cold fury. The queen bee wasn't dead, she was just regrouping. She straightened her spine, her chin lifting in defiance. Fine, she said, her voice dripping with venom. I'll call an emergency board meeting myself. We'll see what the rest of the board has to say about a police officer threatening and intimidating a concerned volunteer community leader. She turned on her heel and began to walk away, then stopped and looked back over her shoulder, a malicious glint in her eye. Oh, and officer, don't forget to submit an architectural request form for that new deadbolt you'll be needing. It has to be from the board's approved list of vendors, of course. A sly, weary smile spread across my face. That was her move. To try and trap me in the very bureaucratic nightmare she had created? It was almost pathetic. Don't worry, Carol, I called after her. I'll be sure to follow all the proper procedures. Her triumphant smirk as she disappeared into her condo was the last I saw of her that night. The next morning I called a locksmith. A big burly guy named Frank arrived, took one look at the key snapped off in my high-end deadbolt, and let out a low whistle. Amateur hour, he grunted, tried to force it with the wrong key. While he worked on drilling out the broken piece and installing a new, significantly more advanced lock, I made some calls of my own. First to a lawyer friend who specialized in property law, and second to my department's non-emergency line to file a formal report for property damage and attempted unlawful entry, naming Carol as the sole suspect. I wanted a paper trail a mile long. The emergency board meeting was held 2 days later in the community clubhouse. The room was small and stuffy, filled with about 30 residents and the other 2 board members, a tired-looking man named Bob, and a woman named Susan who seemed perpetually bewildered. Carol sat at the head of the table, looking prim and composed as if she were the victim here. She started the meeting by launching into a dramatic, tear-filled retelling of our encounter. She painted me as an aggressive, intimidating bully who had accosted her while she was selflessly checking on a neighbor's welfare. She claimed I had threatened her with my badge and confiscated HOA property, referring to the master keys. This officer, she said, pointing a trembling finger at me, is a menace to our peaceful community. He believes his position puts him above our rules. When she finally finished her monologue, there was a tense silence. Bob, the other board member, cleared his throat. Well, this is all very concerning. Officer, he said, turning to me, do you have a response? I do, I said, standing up. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I placed a small stack of papers on the table in front of me. First, let's address the master keys. I held up the heavy key ring. Carol claimed these were HOA property, approved for emergencies. I spoke with our community's insurance provider this morning. They were fascinated to learn about this master key system. In fact, they informed me that having a non-bonded, non-professional individual holding keys to every unit is a massive liability that could potentially void our collective policy in the event of a theft. A nervous murmur rippled through the room. Furthermore, I continued, sliding a document across the table, this is a copy of the police report I filed for the damage to my property and for attempted unlawful entry. The locksmith's official report confirms the damage was caused by an attempt to force the lock. And I have a witness, I said, nodding towards Mr. Henderson, who gave a firm, supportive nod back. Mr. Henderson heard the commotion and saw Carol at my door immediately after the incident. Carol's face was turning a blotchy red. He's your friend. You're colluding against me. Am I also colluding with the state's property code? I asked, pushing another document forward. It was a printout from my lawyer friend, highlighting the specific statutes regarding a tenant's right to privacy and the illegal nature of a landlord or HOA entering a residence without proper 24-hour notice, barring a life-threatening emergency. A wellness check because my curtains are closed does not qualify as life-threatening. It qualifies as stalking. The word stalking hung in the air like a foul smell. Susan, the third board member, finally spoke up, her voice trembling slightly. "Carol, you told us those keys were just for the utility closets and the clubhouse." That was the nail in the coffin. The residents erupted. One woman stood up, yelling that Carol had once let an appraiser into her home while she was on vacation without her permission. Another man shouted that he'd long suspected someone had been in his unit because things were occasionally out of place. The entire facade of Carol's benevolent dictatorship crumbled in a matter of minutes. Bob called the meeting to order. "In light of this information," he said, looking sternly at a now silent Carol, "I move for an immediate vote of no confidence in our president." Susan seconded it instantly. The vote was unanimous, save for Carol's abstention. She was stripped of her title right then and there. The resolution was swift and satisfying. The board, under new leadership, immediately hired a locksmith to rekey the entire complex at the HOA's expense, ensuring no master keys existed. They sent out a formal written apology to every resident, clarifying the rules on privacy and entry. As for Carol, she was facing a civil lawsuit from me for the cost of my new lock and legal fees, and the police report hung over her head like the sword of Damocles. The best part? 2 weeks later, a moving truck pulled up in front of her condo. I watched from my window, sipping a coffee, as she loaded up her boxes. Our eyes met for a moment across the manicured lawn. There was no defiance left in her gaze, only bitter defeat. She got into her car and drove away, leaving the Willows a much quieter and much freer place to live. That afternoon, just for the hell of it, I went out and bought the most colorful, non-compliant, cartoon-covered welcome mat I could find.